The rain came down in sheets, cold and relentless, soaking through Sarah Mitchell's scrubs within seconds of stepping outside. The cardboard box in her arms grew heavier with each step, the bottom softening, threatening to give way. Inside were 17 years of her life at Mercy General Hospital. A chipped coffee mug with "World's Best Nurse" fading on the side, 3 framed certificates she'd never bothered to hang, a potted succulent someone had given her years ago that somehow still lived, and a stack of thank you cards from patients she'd saved. The parking lot stretched before her like an ocean, her sedan a distant island she wasn't sure she'd reach before the box disintegrated completely. Her feet ached in shoes designed for hospital corridors, not asphalt lakes. Water seeped through the worn canvas, each step producing a squelching sound that seemed obscenely loud in the drumming rain. She'd walked this parking lot thousands of times, arriving for night shifts, leaving after double shifts, running out to move her car during code responses. She knew every crack in the pavement, every faded parking line, every light post. But now it felt alien, hostile, as if the hospital itself had turned its back on her along with everyone inside. The automatic doors behind her had closed with mechanical finality. No one had followed her out. No one had said goodbye. Just Helen from HR, tight-lipped and uncomfortable, handing her the box already packed by someone else, avoiding eye contact as she recited the official termination statement. Effective immediately. Violation of protocol. Insubordination. Failure to follow chain of command. Words that turned 17 years of saving lives into a bureaucratic footnote. Sarah's hair, usually pulled back in a practical ponytail, hung in dark ropes around her face. Rain dripped from her nose, her chin, the ends of her sleeves. The box cut into her forearms, the cardboard edges sharp despite the moisture. She shifted her grip, feeling the weight redistribute, feeling something inside slide and crack. Probably the mug. Of course the mug would break. Everything else had. The sky was the color of old bruises, purple-gray and swollen. It was 3:30 in the afternoon, but it looked like dusk. The storm had rolled in fast, the way spring storms did in this part of the country, turning the world dark and angry without warning. Sarah had been in the middle of her shift when Helen appeared at the nurse's station, asking her to step into the administrator's office. She'd thought it was about the incident report she'd filed. She'd thought maybe they wanted to discuss it, to hear her side. She'd been wrong. Her car seemed to get farther away with each step. The parking lot was nearly empty. Most people were inside, working, doing their jobs, continuing with their lives as if nothing had happened, as if Sarah Mitchell hadn't just been erased from the staff roster like a scheduling mistake. She could see a few faces, in the windows of the 4th floor, small and distant, watching. Or maybe not watching her specifically, maybe just looking out at the rain, grateful to be inside, dry, employed. The water in the parking lot was ankle-deep in places, flowing in rivers toward the storm drains. Sarah stepped through a particularly deep puddle and felt the cold water rush over the tops of her shoes, soaking her socks completely. She didn't slow down. Didn't matter anymore. Nothing mattered except reaching her car, getting inside, going home. Wherever home was now. The apartment she could afford on a nurse's salary. The apartment she wouldn't be able to afford much longer. A gust of wind hit her sideways, nearly knocking her off balance. The box shifted dangerously. She tightened her grip, felt the cardboard compress under her fingers, felt the bottom sag even more. Just a little farther. Just another 100 feet. 50 feet. 20. Her keys were in her pocket, but getting them out would require setting. Down the box, and she couldn't do that. Not here. Not in the water. So she kept walking, kept holding, kept feeling the rain beat down on her head and shoulders like judgment, like punishment, like the universe confirming what Dr. Marcus Westfield and his administrative board had decided, that she was wrong, that she had overstepped, that she deserved this. Sarah reached her car and leaned against it, using her body to support the box while she fumbled for her keys. Her fingers were numb, clumsy. The keys slipped once, twice, before she managed to unlock the door. She yanked it open and shoved the box onto the passenger seat, not caring that it tipped over, spilling its contents across the seat and floor. The mug had indeed broken, split cleanly in half. The succulent lay on its side, dirt scattered across the floor mat. The certificates were bent, water-stained. She stood there for a moment, half in and half out of the car, rain still pounding on her back, and felt something crack inside her chest. Not her heart breaking. That was too romantic, too clean. This was something structural giving way, something load-bearing collapsing under weight it was never meant to carry. She'd held people's hands as they died. She'd performed CPR until her arms gave out. She'd made split-second decisions that meant the difference between life and death. And now she was standing in a parking lot in the rain, fired, disgraced, holding the pieces of a broken coffee mug. She got in the car and slammed the door. The sudden silence was shocking. The rain drummed on the roof, but inside it was muffled, distant. Sarah sat there, hands on the steering wheel, not starting the engine, not moving, just breathing. Her scrubs were plastered to her body. Water dripped from her hair onto her lap, onto the seat. She was shaking, but she didn't know if it was from cold or rage or something else entirely. The windows fogged up quickly. The world outside became a blur of gray and darker gray. Sarah reached up and wiped the windshield with her palm, clearing a small circle through which she could see the hospital. 4 stories of brick and glass, modern and efficient and utterly indifferent. Mercy General. She'd given them everything. Every holiday, every weekend, every spare hour. She'd skipped her sister's wedding for a shift. She'd missed her father's funeral because they were short-staffed. She'd put the hospital first, always. Because that's what good nurses did. That's what dedicated professionals did. And they'd thrown her out like trash. The memory of what had happened 3 days ago played in her mind with crystal clarity, the way traumatic memories do. Every detail sharp and cutting. It had been a normal night shift in the ICU. Normal chaos, normal crisis, normal parade of human suffering that she'd learned to navigate with practiced efficiency. Then bed 12 had started crashing. Mr. Chen, 68 years old, post-surgical cardiac patient, suddenly showing signs of acute deterioration. Sarah had been at his bedside within seconds, reading the monitors, checking his lines, her hands moving with the muscle memory of 17 years. His blood pressure was dropping fast, his oxygen saturation was plummeting, and Dr. Westfield, the attending physician, was nowhere to be found. Sarah had paged him, once, twice, 3 times, no response. She'd called his cell, voicemail. She'd sent a nurse to physically find him. Gone, someone said. Left the floor, maybe in his office, maybe in the cafeteria, maybe in the parking garage on a personal call, which he did sometimes, which everyone knew he did, which no one was supposed to talk about. Mr. Chen was dying, right there in bed 12, in front of her, his wife holding his hand and crying, asking Sarah to do something. Please do something, please save him. And Sarah had looked at the monitors, and looked at the crash cart, and looked at the empty doorway where Dr. Westfield should have been. And she'd made a decision. She'd administered the emergency medication herself. She'd made the call that technically, officially, legally, only a physician could make. She'd pushed the drugs that restarted Mr. Chen's failing heart, that brought his blood pressure back up, that pulled him back from the edge. She'd saved his life. And then Dr. Westfield had appeared, 15 minutes later, coffee in hand, and had asked what happened. Sarah had told him, clearly, calmly, with the clinical precision of a nurse reporting to a doctor. She'd explained the deterioration, the failed pages, the emergency intervention. She'd expected him to be grateful, or at least understanding. She'd expected him to recognize that she'd done what needed to be done. Instead, his face had gone red. His jaw had clenched, and he'd said very quietly, "You did what?" The conversation that followed had been brief and brutal. She'd overstepped her authority. She'd violated protocol. She'd administered medication without a physician's order. It didn't matter that Mr. Chen was alive because of her. It didn't matter that Dr. Westfield had been unreachable. It didn't matter that every second had counted. What mattered was the hierarchy, the chain of command, the rules that kept the hospital running smoothly and, more importantly, kept the hospital protected from liability. Dr. Westfield had filed a formal complaint. Sarah had filed an incident report explaining her actions. She'd thought that would be the end of it. A note in her file, maybe a warning, maybe some additional training on protocol. She thought her 17 years of exemplary service would count for something. She thought saving a man's life would count for something. She'd been wrong. The hospital administration had sided with Dr. Westfield immediately. Not because he was right, Sarah understood now, but because he was a doctor and she was a nurse. Because he brought in revenue and she was a cost center. Because he had power and she didn't. Because the hierarchy mattered more than the truth. They'd called it insubordination. They'd called it a violation of protocol. They'd called it grounds for immediate termination. They'd made it official and final and utterly without appeal. And when Sarah had tried to explain, when she'd tried to present her case, when she'd mentioned that Mr. Chen was alive and recovering and grateful, they'd looked at her with cold administrative eyes and said that wasn't the point. The point was order. The point was authority. The point was making sure nurses knew their place. So here she sat, in her car, in the rain, with a broken coffee mug and a dying succulent, and nowhere to go. Sarah finally started the engine. The heater blasted cold air that gradually warmed. She turned on the wipers, clearing the windshield, and put the car in reverse. As she backed out of the space, she took one last look at Mercy General Hospital, at the building that had been her second home, her purpose, her identity for 17 years. The windows were dark with rain. The lights inside glowed warm and yellow. People moved past the glass, shadows going about their business, saving lives, following orders, staying in line. Sarah wondered if any of them were thinking about her. She wondered if any of them cared. She wondered if Dr. Westfield was in there right now, satisfied with himself, secure in his authority, confident that he'd put an uppity nurse in her place. She wondered if Mr. Chen knew what had happened to her, if his wife knew, if they'd been told that the nurse who saved his life had been fired for saving his life. Sarah pulled out of the parking lot and onto the main road. The rain was letting up slightly, but the sky was still dark, still angry. She drove slowly, carefully, her mind blank, her body operating on autopilot. Left at the light, straight for 2 miles, right onto Oak Street. Her apartment was in a complex that had seen better days, but it was clean and safe and affordable, or it had been affordable on a nurse's salary. She parked in her assigned spot and looked at the box on the passenger seat. The contents were scattered, broken, pathetic. She should take it inside. She should start making calls, updating her resume, looking for another job. She should do all the practical things that needed to be done when your life fell apart. Instead, she sat there, engine running, heat blasting, and let herself feel it. All of it. The rage at Dr. Westfield for being absent when his patient needed him. The rage at the administration for choosing hierarchy over justice. The rage at her colleagues for saying nothing, for watching her be escorted out without protest, for going back to work as if nothing had happened. The rage at herself for believing that doing the right thing would be enough. But beneath the rage was something else, something quieter, but deeper. A bone-tired exhaustion that came from giving everything and having it thrown back in your eyes. Sarah had spent 17 years running on adrenaline and purpose, fueled by the belief that what she did mattered, that she was making a difference, that saving lives was worth the sacrifice. And in one conversation, in one administrative decision, that had all been stripped away. She wasn't a hero. She was insubordinate. She wasn't competent. She was a liability. She wasn't valuable. She was replaceable. The rain picked up again, hammering on the roof. Sarah turned off the engine and grabbed the box, holding it from the bottom this time, keeping it level. She got out of the car and walked to her apartment, second floor, end unit. The stairs were slick with rain. She took them slowly, carefully, focusing on each step, on not falling, on not dropping the box again. Inside, her apartment was dark and quiet. She set the box on the kitchen counter and stood there, dripping on the linoleum, not bothering to turn on lights. The refrigerator hummed. The clock on the microwave glowed. Green, 4:17. She should change out of her wet scrubs. She should eat something. She should call someone. Her sister, maybe. Or her friend Janet, who worked at County General. But she didn't move. She just stood there in the dark, in her wet scrubs, feeling the water drip from her hair and clothes, feeling the weight of the day settle onto her shoulders like a physical thing. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, Sarah Mitchell, RN, 17 years of service, termination effective, immediately stood in her kitchen and wondered what the hell she was supposed to do now. The night Mr. Chen crashed wasn't the first time Sarah had made a critical decision in a doctor's absence, but it was the first time she'd been punished for it. Over 17 years, she developed the kind of instinct that comes from seeing thousands of patients, from recognizing patterns in vital signs, from knowing the difference between stable and about to code before the monitors even caught up. Other nurses came to her with questions. Residents asked her opinion. Even some of the attending physicians trusted her judgment, though they'd never admit it officially. Dr. Marcus Westfield was not one of those physicians. He'd joined Mercy General 2 years ago, recruited from a private practice in Connecticut with promises of a department head position and a generous salary. He was 53, impeccably dressed, and utterly convinced of his own brilliance. He had the kind of confidence that came not from competence, but from never being told no, from moving through a world that consistently validated his authority simply because he was a doctor and male, and spoke with absolute certainty even when he was wrong. Sarah had clashed with him before. Small things mostly. He'd order medications at dosages she knew were incorrect, and she'd double-check with pharmacy, and he'd be irritated that she'd questioned him. He'd miss subtle changes in a patient's condition that she'd noticed, and when she'd point them out, he'd act as if he'd been about to mention it himself. He had a habit of dismissing nurses' observations, of treating them like waitresses rather than medical professionals, of making it clear that his MD made him inherently superior to anyone with an RN after their name. But he was good at playing politics. He golfed with the hospital CEO. He brought in wealthy patients. He knew how to charm the board members and the administrators, and he knew how to protect himself. When Mr. Chen had started crashing, Sarah had followed protocol exactly. She'd paged Dr. Westfield through the hospital system 3 times, each page marked urgent. She'd called his cell phone and left a voicemail explaining the situation. She'd sent another nurse to physically locate him. She'd done everything she was supposed to do, everything the rules required. But the rules didn't account for a doctor who turned off his pager because he was tired of being interrupted. They didn't account for a doctor who went to his office to make personal calls and didn't want to be disturbed. They didn't account for a doctor who prioritized his own convenience over his patients' lives. And the rules definitely didn't account for a nurse who decided that a patient's life mattered more than protocol. Sarah had stood at Mr. Chen's bedside watching his blood pressure drop, 90/60, 80/50, 70/40, watching his oxygen saturation plummet, watching his heart rate become erratic. His wife was crying, gripping his hand, begging Sarah to help him. The other nurses were looking at her, waiting for her to make the call, because she was the senior nurse, the one with 17 years of experience, the one who always knew what to do. She'd looked at the crash cart. She'd looked at the medications she'd administered 100 times under doctor's orders. She'd looked at Mr. Chen's grey face, his labored breathing, his failing body, and she'd made the decision. She'd pushed the epinephrine. She'd adjusted his IV medications. She'd increased his oxygen. She'd done exactly what needed to be done. What any competent physician would have ordered if they'd been there. What Dr. Westfield himself would have done if he'd bothered to answer his pager. And it had worked. Mr. Chen's blood pressure stabilized. His oxygen levels came back up. His heart rate regulated. By the time Dr. Westfield finally appeared, coffee in hand, asking what all the fuss was about, Mr. Chen was stable and recovering. Sarah had expected Dr. Westfield to be relieved, maybe even grateful. Instead, he'd been furious. Not because she'd done anything wrong medically. Mr. Chen's chart showed that her interventions had been textbook perfect, but because she'd made him look bad. She'd exposed his absence. She'd demonstrated that the hospital could function without him, that a nurse could make critical decisions, that his authority wasn't as essential as he liked to believe. So he'd filed a complaint, not about patient care. He couldn't, because the care had been flawless, but about protocol violation, about insubordination, about a nurse overstepping her bounds. He'd framed it as a dangerous precedent, a breakdown in the chain of command, a threat to patient safety. He'd made it about everything except what it actually was. A doctor protecting his ego at the expense of a nurse who'd saved his patient's life. The hospital administration had backed him immediately. Sarah understood why, even if it made her sick. Dr. Westfield brought in money. He had connections. He could make trouble for the hospital if they didn't support him. Sarah was just a nurse. Skilled, yes. Experienced, yes. But ultimately replaceable. There were always more nurses. There were always people willing to work long hours for modest pay, to follow orders without question, to know their place in the hierarchy. The meeting with administration had been brief and brutal. 3 people she'd never met, sitting behind a conference table, looking at her with expressions that ranged from uncomfortable to hostile. They'd already made their decision before she walked in. The meeting was just a formality, a chance for them to deliver the verdict and make it official. "Ms. Mitchell," the HR director had said, not bothering with pleasantries, "we've reviewed Dr. Westfield's complaint and your incident report. The facts are clear. You administered medication without a physician's order. That's a direct violation of hospital protocol and, frankly, of your nursing license requirements." Sarah had tried to explain. Mr. Chen was coding. "I paged Dr. Westfield multiple times. I called his cell. I sent someone to find him. I did everything I was supposed to do, but he wasn't available, and the patient was dying. That doesn't give you the authority to act as a physician," the medical director had cut in. He was a doctor himself, naturally, and his tone made it clear whose side he was on. "There are protocols for a reason. If you couldn't reach the attending, you should have contacted another physician." "There wasn't time," Sarah had said, keeping her voice level despite the anger rising in her chest. "Every second mattered. If I'd waited another 5 minutes to track down another doctor, Mr. Chen would have died." "That's speculation," the HR director had said. "What's not speculation is that you violated protocol. You administered medication without authorization. You acted outside your scope of practice. I saved his life. That's not the point." And there it was. That's not the point. Not the point that a man was alive because of her. Not the point that she'd done her job, the real job, the one that mattered. Not the point that Dr. Westfield had been absent and unreachable. The point was order. The point was hierarchy. The point was making sure nurses stayed in their lane. Sarah had tried one more time. Dr. Westfield wasn't available. He turned off his pager. He was making personal calls in his office while his patient was dying. Doesn't that matter? The 3 administrators had exchanged glances. The medical director had cleared his throat. "Dr. Westfield's whereabouts are not your concern. Your concern is following protocol, which you failed to do. So you're saying I should have let Mr. Chen die? We're saying you should have followed proper channels. I did follow proper channels. They didn't work. Then you should have found another physician." There wasn't time. They'd gone in circles like that for another 10 minutes. Sarah trying to make them understand, them refusing to acknowledge anything except the violation of protocol. Finally, the HR director had delivered the verdict. Immediate termination, effective at the end of the shift. No appeal, no second chances. Security would escort her out. She would turn in her badge and her keys. She would be removed from the staff directory. She would be marked as ineligible for rehire. 17 years. Erased in 15 minutes. Sarah had asked to speak with the CEO. Denied. She'd asked to address the medical board. Denied. She'd asked if Mr. Chen or his family had been consulted. The question had been met with silence and uncomfortable looks. She'd left the conference room in a daze, gone back to the ICU to finish her shift, moved through the motions of patient care with mechanical efficiency. Her colleagues had avoided eye contact. Word had spread fast. Everyone knew. No one said anything. No one stood up for her. No one questioned the decision. They just kept their heads down and did their jobs, grateful it wasn't them, relieved they hadn't been the one to break protocol. At the end of her shift, Helen from HR had appeared with the box, already packed. Someone had gone through Sarah's locker while she was working, had gathered her personal items, had erased her presence from the break room and the nurse's station. They'd been efficient about it, professional, cold, and now she was here, in her apartment, in the dark, with a box of broken belongings and no job and no idea what came next. Sarah finally moved, peeling off her wet scrubs and leaving them in a heap on the bathroom floor. She stood under the shower for a long time, letting the hot water beat down on her head and shoulders, washing away the rain and the hospital smell and the feeling of Helen's uncomfortable expression as she'd handed over the box. But it didn't wash away the anger. That stayed, coiled tight in her chest, hot and sharp. Anger at Dr. Westfield for being a coward and a bully. Anger at the administration for choosing politics over justice. Anger at her colleagues for their silence. Anger at a system that valued hierarchy over competence, that protected doctors and discarded nurses, that punished people for doing the right thing. Sarah got out of the shower and dried off, moving slowly, her body heavy with exhaustion. She pulled on sweatpants and a t-shirt and went to the kitchen. The box was still there on the counter, its contents scattered. She picked up the two halves of the broken mug, fitted them together, saw the crack that ran straight through "World's Best Nurse." She set them down carefully and turned away. She should eat, she should make calls, she should start planning. But she couldn't. Not yet. Not tonight. Tonight, she just needed to sit in the dark and let herself feel the weight of what had been taken from her. Tomorrow, she could be practical. Tomorrow, she could be strong. Tonight, she could just be angry and hurt and lost. Outside, the storm continued. Inside, Sarah Mitchell sat on her couch in the dark and wondered if doing the right thing would ever be enough. 3 days passed in a gray blur. Sarah didn't leave the apartment except to check the mail. She didn't answer her phone except for her sister's increasingly worried calls. She didn't look at job postings or update her resume or do any of the practical things she knew she needed to do. She just existed, moving from couch to bed to kitchen and back again, eating when she remembered to eat, sleeping in fitful bursts, waking with her heart racing from dreams of Mr. Chen coding while she stood frozen, unable to move, unable to help. On the 4th day, she forced herself to function. She made coffee. She opened her laptop. She started looking at job listings for nurses in the area. There weren't many. Healthcare was always hiring, but word traveled fast in the medical community. She'd been fired from Mercy General for insubordination. That would follow her. Every interview would ask why she'd left her previous position. Every reference check would turn up the termination. Every potential employer would see the red flag and move on to the next candidate. She could try hospitals in other cities, other states, start over somewhere no one knew her name. But that required money she didn't have, energy she couldn't summon, hope she'd lost. Somewhere in that conference room, her phone rang. Janet, her friend from County General. Sarah let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. Janet's voice was careful, sympathetic. She'd heard what happened. She was sorry. If Sarah needed anything at all, just call. There was a pause. Then, I talked to our nurse manager. She said she'd be willing to meet with you, off the record, to discuss opportunities here. But Sarah, she also said she'd have to check with administration. First, and with your termination being for protocol violation, I'm sorry. I just wanted to be honest with you. Sarah deleted the message. So even County General, understaffed and desperate for experienced nurses, wouldn't touch her. The blacklist was real and immediate. She made herself lunch, a sandwich she barely tasted, and was washing the plate when she heard it. A sound that didn't belong, that cut through the ambient noise of the apartment complex like a knife. A deep, rhythmic thumping that grew louder with each second. Sarah looked up, frowning, trying to place it. Helicopters. Multiple helicopters. Close. She went to the window and looked out. The sky had cleared since the storm, bright and blue and innocent. But coming from the east, flying low, were 2 massive black helicopters. Military helicopters. Blackhawks, if she wasn't mistaken. Though her knowledge of military aircraft was limited to what she'd seen in movies, they were heading toward Mercy General. Sarah watched them pass overhead, their rotors creating a pressure wave she could feel even through the glass. They were flying in formation, purposeful and urgent. Something big was happening at the hospital, some kind of emergency that required military intervention. For a moment, just a moment, she felt the old instinct kick in, the need to help, to respond, to be there. Then, reality crashed back. She wasn't a nurse at Mercy General anymore. She wasn't a nurse anywhere. Whatever was happening at that hospital, it had nothing to do with her. Sarah turned away from the window and went back to her laptop. She had applications to fill out, a future to salvage, a life to rebuild. The helicopters and whatever emergency they represented were someone else's problem now. She had no idea how wrong she was. At Mercy General Hospital, chaos had arrived with the helicopters. They'd landed in the parking lot, the same parking lot where Sarah had walked through the rain 4 days ago, their rotors creating a windstorm that sent loose papers and trash flying, that made people shield their faces and run for cover. Doctors and nurses and administrators crowded at the windows, staring, trying to understand what was happening. The helicopter's doors opened and soldiers emerged. Not paramedics, not medical personnel. Soldiers in full tactical gear, moving with practiced efficiency, securing a perimeter. An officer stepped out, a Navy commander based on his uniform, flanked by 2 armed personnel. He strode toward the hospital entrance with the kind of authority that made people step aside automatically. Inside, the lobby erupted in confused murmurs. Security guards approached, uncertain, hands hovering near their radios. The commander didn't slow down. He walked straight to the reception desk, where a young woman stared at him with wide eyes. "I need to speak with your administrator immediately," he said. His voice was clipped, professional, brooking no argument. "This is a matter of national security." The receptionist fumbled with her phone, paged administration, stammered something about military personnel in the lobby. Within minutes, the CEO appeared, flanked by the medical director and the head of security. The CEO, Richard Thornton, 60 years old, expensive suit, carefully maintained tan, approached with the kind of forced smile he used for difficult donors. "Commander, I'm Richard Thornton, CEO of Mercy General. How can we help you? You have a nurse on staff named Sarah Mitchell," the commander said. Not a question, a statement. The smile faltered. Thornton glanced at the medical director, who shifted uncomfortably. "Ms. Mitchell is no longer employed by this hospital. Where is she? I'm not at liberty to—" "This is not a request." The commander's voice didn't rise, but it carried a weight that made Thornton take a step back. "We have a critical situation that requires Ms. Mitchell's immediate assistance. Her specific expertise is essential. Now, where is she?" Dr. Westfield had appeared, drawn by the commotion. He pushed through the crowd, his face flushed with irritation. "I'm Dr. Marcus Westfield, head of critical care. Perhaps I can help with whatever situation you're facing. Ms. Mitchell was a nurse in my department, but she's no longer with us due to professional issues. However, I'm more than qualified to—" The commander turned to look at him, just looked. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Dr. Westfield's voice trailed off. "We don't need a doctor," the commander said flatly. "We need Sarah Mitchell, specifically. Now I'll ask one more time. Where is she?" Thornton cleared his throat. "She was terminated 4 days ago. We have her address on file, but I'll need to check with our legal department before releasing personal information. You have 30 seconds to provide that address before I have my people search your records themselves." The threat hung in the air. Thornton looked at the soldiers, standing behind the commander, at their weapons, at their absolute readiness. He looked at the medical director, who nodded slightly. He looked at the crowd of staff members watching from every doorway and corridor. "Helen," he called to the HR director, who'd been hovering at the edge of the crowd. "Get Ms. Mitchell's address, now." Helen disappeared into her office. The lobby was silent except for the distant sound of the helicopter rotors still spinning outside. Staff members whispered to each other, speculating, wondering. What could possibly require a specific nurse? What kind of national security situation needed Sarah Mitchell? Dr. Westfield tried again. "Commander, I don't understand. What exactly is this situation? Perhaps if you explained—" "That's classified. But surely a physician would be more appropriate." "We need Ms. Mitchell, no one else." Helen returned with a printout. "She lives at Oakwood Apartments, Unit 214. It's about 3 miles from here." The commander took the paper, glanced at it, and turned to leave. Thornton stepped forward. "Commander, wait. Can you at least tell us what this is about? Ms. Mitchell was terminated for violating hospital protocol. If there's some kind of security clearance issue we should know about." The commander stopped and turned back. His expression was cold. You fired her for saving a patient's life when a doctor failed to respond. I read the incident report. I read the termination paperwork. You punished competence and protected incompetence. He looked directly at Dr. Westfield. And now we need that competence for something that actually matters. He left. The soldiers followed. Within seconds, they were back in the helicopters, which lifted off with a roar that shook the building's windows. Everyone watched them go, heading west, toward Oakwood Apartments, toward Sarah. In the lobby, the silence stretched. Then everyone started talking at once, voices overlapping, questions flying. What was happening? Why did they need Sarah? What had she done? What was the crisis? Dr. Westfield stood frozen, his face pale. Thornton looked at the medical director, then at Helen, then at the crowd of staff members who were all staring at him with expressions ranging from confusion to accusation. "Everyone back to work," he said, his voice tight. "This doesn't concern hospital operations." But no one moved, because they all knew suddenly and with perfect clarity that they'd made a terrible mistake, that they'd fired the wrong person, that whatever was happening, whatever crisis required military intervention and helicopters and armed soldiers, it needed Sarah Mitchell, and she was gone. Sarah was making another cup of coffee when she heard them. The sound was different this time, closer, louder, more immediate. The windows rattled. The dishes in the cabinet shook. The entire building seemed to vibrate with the bass-heavy thump of helicopter rotors. She ran to the window and looked out. Two Blackhawks were descending toward the apartment complex parking lot. People were running out of their apartments, pointing, filming with their phones. The helicopters landed, their rotors creating a dust storm that obscured everything for a moment. Then soldiers emerged, moving fast, moving with purpose, spreading out across the parking lot. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. What the hell was happening? Was this a terrorist incident? An active shooter? Some kind of evacuation? She grabbed her phone, checked for emergency alerts. Nothing. Checked the news. Nothing. Looked back out the window and saw the soldiers moving toward her building, toward her stairwell. Someone was pounding on her door. Sarah froze, coffee cup still in her hand. The pounding came again, urgent, commanding. "Sarah Mitchell, military personnel, open the door." She set down the cup with shaking hands and went to the door, looked through the peephole and saw a Navy uniform, a commander's insignia, a face that was all business. She opened the door. 3 soldiers stood in the hallway, the commander in front, 2 armed personnel behind him. Other residents were peering out of their apartments, eyes wide with fear and confusion. "Sarah Mitchell?" the commander asked. "Yes," she managed. "What's happening? Is there an emergency?" "Ma'am, I'm Commander James Reeves, United States Navy. We need you to come with us immediately." "Come with you where? Why? I don't understand." "Ma'am, we have a critical situation that requires your specific expertise. I can't explain more here. We need to leave now." Sarah's mind raced. This didn't make sense. She was a nurse, an unemployed nurse. What could the military possibly need from her? "I think you have the wrong person. I'm just a nurse. I'm not even employed right now. I don't have any military experience or security clearance or..." "You're Sarah Mitchell, RN. 17 years of experience at Mercy General Hospital, specialized in critical care and cardiac emergency response." "Yes, but..." "Then you're the right person. We don't have time to explain. There's a situation aboard a naval vessel that requires immediate intervention. You're the only person in this region with the specific combination of skills and experience we need." "What kind of situation? What vessel?" "That's classified, ma'am. But I can tell you that lives are at stake. Multiple lives. And we need someone who can make critical decisions under pressure. Someone who knows cardiac emergency protocols inside and out. Someone who's proven they can act independently when necessary." The last part hit her like a physical blow. Someone who can act independently when necessary. They knew. Somehow, they knew about Mr. Chen, about her termination, about why she'd been fired. "How do you know about that?" she asked quietly. "Ma'am, we know everything we need to know. And right now, we need you. Will you come with us?" Sarah looked past him at the soldiers, at the helicopters visible through the stairwell window, at her neighbors watching from their doorways. This was insane. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to unemployed nurses in apartment complexes, but the commander's expression was deadly serious. And somewhere, on some naval vessel, people were apparently dying. "I need to change," she said, "and get my nursing bag. You have 2 minutes." Sarah ran back into her apartment, her mind spinning. She pulled on jeans and a sweater, grabbed her nursing bag from the closet. She'd kept it packed out of habit, even after being fired. Inside were supplies she'd accumulated over the years: a stethoscope, a blood pressure cuff, emergency medications she'd replaced out of her own pocket, trauma scissors, tourniquets, IV supplies, everything a good nurse kept ready. She was back at the door in 90 seconds. The commander nodded approval and gestured toward the stairs. "Let's move." They went down the stairs fast, the soldiers flanking her, moving with practiced efficiency. Outside, the parking lot was crowded with residents, all filming, all talking, all trying to figure out what was happening. Sarah saw Mrs. Chen from Unit 108, saw her eyes widen in recognition, saw her pull out her phone and start typing frantically. The commander led her to the nearest helicopter. The side door was open, and hands reached down to help her up. She climbed inside, her nursing bag clutched to her chest, and found herself surrounded by equipment and personnel. A medic sat across from her, looking relieved. "Thank God," he said. "We've been searching for you for 6 hours." 6 hours? Why? What's happening? But the rotors were already spinning up, drowning out conversation. The commander climbed in behind her. The door slid shut, and the helicopter lifted off with a lurch that made Sarah's stomach drop. Through the window, she could see her apartment complex shrinking below, could see people still filming, still watching. Could see, in the distance, Mercy General Hospital. The flight took 20 minutes. No one spoke. The noise made conversation impossible. Sarah sat with her nursing bag on her lap, her mind racing through possibilities. A naval vessel, cardiac emergency, multiple lives at stake. What could possibly require her specifically? There were military medics, military doctors, entire medical teams on naval vessels. Why would they need a civilian nurse? Unless the situation was so specific, so unusual, that they needed someone with her exact experience. Someone who'd dealt with a particular kind of cardiac crisis before. Someone who knew how to improvise when standard protocols failed. The helicopter began to descend. Sarah looked out the window and felt her breath catch. Below them was a naval base, massive and sprawling, with ships docked at piers stretching into the water. But they weren't heading for the base proper. They were heading for a ship, a guided missile destroyer, sleek, and gray and bristling with weapons systems. They landed on the ship's helipad with a precision that spoke of practiced expertise. The door slid open, and the commander gestured for Sarah to follow. She climbed out onto the deck, the wind from the rotors still whipping around her, and found herself face to face with a captain. A Navy captain, 4 stripes on his shoulder boards, his face lined with stress and exhaustion. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, having to shout over the helicopter noise. "Thank you for coming. I'm Captain Morrison. We have a situation below deck that's beyond our medical staff's ability to handle. If you'll follow me." He turned and started walking toward a hatch. Sarah followed, the commander behind her, her mind still trying to catch up with reality. They went down a ladder, then another, moving deeper into the ship. The corridors were narrow, lit with harsh fluorescent lights, smelling of metal and oil and something else. Fear, maybe, or desperation. They reached the high medical bay. Inside, chaos. 3 sailors on beds, all connected to monitors, all showing the same alarming pattern. Irregular heartbeats, dropping blood pressure, signs of acute cardiac distress. The ship's doctor, a lieutenant commander, looked up as they entered, his face pale with relief. "Thank God you're here," he said. "I've tried everything. Standard protocols aren't working. They're all deteriorating and I don't know why." Sarah moved to the nearest bed, her training taking over, pushing. Aside the surreal nature of the situation, she checked the monitor, checked the patient's pupils, checked his pulse, then the second patient, then the third. Her mind processed the information with the speed of 17 years of experience. "Tell me what happened," she said, her voice calm and professional. "All of it. Start from the beginning," the ship's doctor explained. They'd been running a training exercise 3 days ago. These 3 sailors had been exposed to a chemical agent, accidentally, a malfunction in the ventilation system during a drill. They'd been treated immediately, standard decontamination protocols, and had seemed fine initially. But over the past 48 hours, they'd all developed the same cardiac symptoms. Progressive deterioration despite treatment. Nothing was working. Sarah listened, her mind racing. Chemical exposure, delayed cardiac symptoms, progressive deterioration. She'd seen something like this before. Not exactly this, but similar. Years ago, at Mercy General, a patient who'd been exposed to industrial chemicals. The standard treatments hadn't worked then either, because the chemical had caused a specific kind of cellular damage that required a different approach. "What chemical?" she asked. The doctor told her. Sarah's eyes widened. She knew this. She'd researched it after that patient, had read everything she could find, had even written a case study that had been published in a nursing journal. This chemical caused a specific kind of mitochondrial dysfunction that disrupted cardiac cell metabolism. Standard cardiac medications didn't address the root cause. You needed a different protocol, one that supported cellular function while the body cleared the toxin. "I know what this is," she said. "I've treated it before. But the protocol is unconventional. It's not in standard medical texts." "Can you fix it?" Captain Morrison asked from the doorway. Sarah looked at the 3 sailors, all young, all dying. Looked at the ship's doctor, desperate and out of options. Looked at the commander who'd brought her here, who'd known somehow that she was the right person for this. "Yes," she said, "but I'll need specific medications, and I'll need to administer them in a specific sequence. And I'll need everyone to trust me and not question my decisions." The ship's doctor hesitated. "Ms. Mitchell, I appreciate your experience, but I'm the medical officer on this vessel. I can't just—" "Lieutenant." "Commander," Captain Morrison cut in, his voice hard. "Ms. Mitchell is here because she has expertise we don't. You've tried everything you know and it's not working. These men are dying. So either you follow her lead, or you can explain to their families why you let your ego get in the way of saving their lives." The doctor's face flushed, but he nodded. "What do you need?" Sarah opened her nursing bag and started pulling out supplies. "First, I need you to get me these medications." She rattled off a list. The doctor's eyes widened. "That's not a standard cardiac protocol." "I know. That's why it'll work. Trust me." For the next 4 hours, Sarah worked. She administered the medications in carefully timed sequences, monitoring each patient's response, adjusting dosages based on their individual reactions. She explained her reasoning as she went, teaching the ship's doctor the protocol, making sure he understood the underlying mechanism so he could continue treatment if needed. Slowly, gradually, the patients stabilized. Their heart rhythms regularized. Their blood pressure came back up. Color returned to their faces. By the end of the 4th hour, all 3 were stable and improving. Sarah stepped back from the last bed, exhausted, her hands shaking slightly from adrenaline. The ship's doctor was staring at the monitors with an expression of disbelief. "It worked," he said quietly. "It actually worked. It'll take another 48 hours for the chemical to fully clear their systems," Sarah said. "Keep them on the maintenance protocol I showed you. Monitor for any complications. But they should be fine." Captain Morrison had been watching from the doorway the entire time. Now he stepped forward. "Ms. Mitchell, on behalf of the United States Navy and these 3 sailors' families, thank you. You saved their lives." Sarah nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of everything crash down on her. The adrenaline was fading, leaving exhaustion and confusion in its wake. "How did you find me?" she asked. "How did you know I could help?" "We have people who monitor medical literature," the captain said. "Your case study on chemical-induced cardiac dysfunction was flagged in our database. When this situation developed and our medical staff couldn't resolve it, someone remembered your paper. We tracked you down to Mercy General and—" He paused. "We learned about your recent termination." "You read the incident report," Sarah said. "Not a question." "We did. And we saw exactly the kind of person you are. Someone who makes the right call under pressure. Someone who acts when action is needed. Someone who saves lives even when it costs them everything." He looked at her steadily. The Navy could use someone like you, Ms. Mitchell. Sarah blinked. Are you offering me a job? I'm saying that what happened at Mercy General was a failure of leadership and judgment on their part, not yours. And I'm saying that there are places that value competence over hierarchy. If you're interested, I can make some calls. Before Sarah could respond, Commander Reeves appeared in the doorway. Captain, we need to return Ms. Mitchell to shore, but there's something you should know. The media got wind of this. Someone at her apartment complex filmed the extraction. It's all over the news. And someone at Mercy General leaked the story about why she was fired. Captain Morrison frowned. Leaked it how? Social media. A nurse posted about it. Said the hospital. Fired the woman who saved a patient's life. And now the military needs her for a national security situation. It's going viral. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Oh no. Oh yes, the commander said with a slight smile. Ms. Mitchell, you're about to become very famous. And Mercy General Hospital is about to have a very bad day. The helicopter ride back was different. This time Sarah sat in stunned silence, processing everything. She'd saved 3 lives. The Navy was offering her opportunities. And apparently the entire internet now knew that Mercy General had fired her for doing her job. As they approached the naval base to refuel before returning her home, Commander Reeves handed her his phone. You might want to see this. Sarah took the phone and looked at the screen. It was a Twitter thread. Thousands of retweets trending nationally. The original post was from a nurse at Mercy General. Janet, Sarah realized with shock. Her friend Janet had broken her silence. This is Sarah Mitchell. She worked at Mercy General for 17 years. She saved a patient's life when the doctor failed to respond. The hospital fired her for it. Today, the U.S. Navy landed helicopters to bring her to a national security emergency. They needed her, not the doctor who got her fired, not the administrators who backed him, her. And now we all know what Mercy General values more than competence, hierarchy and ego. Shame on us for staying silent. Shame on them for punishing excellence. The thread had exploded. Thousands of comments from nurses sharing their own stories of being undervalued, of being punished for doing the right thing, of watching incompetent doctors be protected while skilled nurses were discarded. Patients were chiming in with stories of nurses who'd saved them. Even some doctors were commenting, calling out the toxic hierarchy, demanding better. And then Sarah saw the news coverage. Local stations had picked up the story. National outlets were running with it. Fired nurse saves Navy personnel in classified emergency. Hospital terminates woman who later proves essential to national security. Military intervention highlights healthcare's broken hierarchy. Her phone, her actual phone, which she'd left in her apartment, was probably exploding with messages. Her email was probably flooded. Her life, which had been quietly falling apart 4 days ago, was now a national story. This is insane, she said quietly. This is justice, Commander Reeves replied. Sometimes it takes something dramatic to expose the truth. You did nothing wrong, Ms. Mitchell. You saved lives. That's what matters. And now everyone knows it. They landed at the naval base. Captain Morrison met them on the tarmac, along with several other officers. Ms. Mitchell, before you go, I want to make this official. The Navy would like to offer you a position as a civilian medical consultant. It comes with security clearance, competitive salary, and the opportunity to work. On cases that actually matter. No hospital politics. No incompetent doctors protecting their egos. Just medicine. What do you say? Sarah looked at him, at the officers standing behind him, at the destroyer visible in the distance where 3 sailors were alive because of her. She thought about Mercy General, about Dr. Westfield, about the administrators who'd thrown her away. She thought about the box of broken belongings sitting on her kitchen counter. I say yes, she said. Absolutely yes. Captain Morrison smiled and extended his hand. Welcome aboard, Ms. Mitchell. We'll be in touch about the details. For now, we'll get you home. But I suspect you're going to have quite a crowd waiting for you. He wasn't wrong. When the helicopter landed at Oakwood Apartments 2 hours later, Sarah saw that the parking lot was packed with news vans, reporters with cameras, neighbors with phones, and standing at the front of the crowd, looking small and uncomfortable and utterly out of place, were Richard Thornton and Dr. Marcus Westfield, from Mercy General Hospital. Sarah's heart hammered as she climbed out of the helicopter. Commander Reeves stayed close to her, along with 2 other soldiers. The crowd surged forward, reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing. The soldiers created a protective barrier, keeping everyone back. Thornton pushed through the crowd, his expensive suit rumpled, his face pale. "Ms. Mitchell, if we could speak privately." "No," Sarah said flatly. "Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of everyone." He glanced at the cameras, at the reporters recording everything, and swallowed hard. The hospital would like to discuss your termination. We believe there may have been misunderstandings. We'd like to offer you reinstatement with full back pay and—" "No," Sarah said again. Dr. Westfield stepped forward. "Ms. Mitchell, I think we got off on the wrong foot. If we could just sit down and talk about what happened with—" "Mr. Chen, you mean the patient I saved while you were making personal calls?" Sarah's voice was loud enough to carry to the cameras. "The patient who's alive because I violated protocol? That patient?" Dr. Westfield's face flushed red. "That's not fair. I was dealing with an important—" "You were absent," Sarah cut him off. "You were unreachable. You failed your patient. And when I saved his life, you punished me for it because it made you look bad. That's not a misunderstanding, Dr. Westfield. That's exactly what happened." The reporters were eating it up, cameras rolling, questions flying. Thornton tried to salvage the situation. "Ms. Mitchell, please. The hospital made a mistake. We're willing to admit that. We want to make this right." "You want to make this right?" Sarah looked at him, at Dr. Westfield, at the crowd of reporters and neighbors and colleagues who'd come to watch. "Then start by firing Dr. Westfield. Start by changing the protocols that punish nurses for saving lives. Start by actually valuing competence over hierarchy. Can you do that?" Thornton's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. "That's what I thought," Sarah said. She turned to Commander Reeves. "Can we go inside now?" "Absolutely, ma'am." The soldiers escorted her through the crowd, up the stairs to her apartment. Behind them, the reporters mobbed Thornton and Dr. Westfield, questions sharp and accusatory. Sarah heard fragments as she climbed the stairs. "Is it true you fired her? For saving a life? Why did the military need her specifically? What do you say to nurses who claim this is part of a pattern?" Inside her apartment, Sarah closed the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. Commander Reeves stood in her living room, looking around at the sparse furnishings, the box still sitting on the kitchen counter. "You handled that well," he said. "I just ended their careers," Sarah said quietly. "No, they ended their own careers when they chose ego over competence. You just made sure everyone knew about it." He pulled out a card and handed it to her. "This has my contact information and Captain Morrison's. We'll be in touch about the consultant position within 48 hours. In the meantime, you might want to stay away from social media. This is going to get bigger before it gets smaller." "Thank you," Sarah said, "for coming to get me, for giving me a chance to help. Thank you for being the kind of person worth coming to get." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Ms. Mitchell, there are a lot of people in healthcare who do what you do, who make the right call under pressure, who save lives at personal cost. They're watching this story, and they're seeing that sometimes competence does get recognized, that sometimes doing the right thing does matter. You're giving them hope. Don't underestimate the value of that." He left. Sarah stood alone in her apartment, listening to the helicopter take off, listening to the crowd outside gradually disperse. She went to the window and looked out. The news vans were still there, but Thornton and Dr. Westfield were gone, probably fleeing back to Mercy General to try to control the damage. Her phone, her actual phone, was on the counter. She picked it up and saw that it had died. She plugged it in and waited for it to power on. When it did, the notifications were overwhelming. Hundreds of texts, missed calls, emails, social media notifications. She scrolled through some of them. Messages of support from nurses across the country, job offers from hospitals in a dozen states, interview requests from major news outlets, and one message from a number she didn't recognize. "Ms. Mitchell, this is David Chen. You saved my father's life. Thank you. And thank you for standing up for what's right. The world needs more people like you." Sarah sat down on her couch, phone in hand, and felt something shift inside her. The anger was still there. It would probably always be there to some degree. But it was joined now by something else: purpose, validation, hope. She'd lost her job. She'd been humiliated. She'd spent 4 days in the dark wondering if doing the right thing would ever be enough. And then 2 military helicopters had landed, and a Navy commander had said, "We need you, specifically, no one else." Sarah looked at the box on the counter, at the broken mug, at the scattered certificates. Then she stood up, walked over, and threw it all in the trash. She didn't need those reminders anymore. She didn't need that identity. She was Sarah Mitchell, RN, 17 years of experience, expert in cardiac emergencies, future Navy consultant. She was the woman who'd saved Mr. Chen's life, who'd saved 3 sailors' lives, who'd stood up to an incompetent doctor and a cowardly administration and refused to back down. She was the woman 2 military helicopters had come looking for, and that was enough. The next morning, Sarah woke to her phone ringing. She'd finally turned off notifications around midnight, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of messages, but she'd left the ringer on for important calls. This was Captain Morrison. "Ms. Mitchell, good morning. I hope you got some rest." "Some," Sarah said, sitting up. "What's happening?" "Quite a bit, actually. First, the 3 sailors you treated are continuing to improve. The ship's doctor asked me to pass along his gratitude and to tell you he's already implementing your protocol into the Naval Medical Database. Second, your security clearance is being fast-tracked. We'd like you to start as soon as possible. And third," he paused, "you might want to turn on the news." Sarah grabbed her laptop and pulled up a news site. The headline made her breath catch. "Mercy General Hospital CEO resigns amid scandal. Board launches investigation into termination practices." She clicked the article. Richard Thornton had resigned late last night, citing personal reasons. But sources indicated the board had forced him out. Dr. Marcus Westfield had been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. The hospital was facing a PR nightmare, with nurses' unions calling for systemic changes and patients demanding accountability. But that wasn't all. The article continued. "In a surprising development, Mr. David Chen, whose life was saved by Ms. Mitchell, has announced he's filing a lawsuit against Mercy General Hospital and Dr. Westfield personally for negligence and wrongful termination of the nurse who saved his life." Chen, a retired attorney, stated that he intends to make sure this never happens to another nurse again. Sarah read the whole article twice, then looked up more coverage. It was everywhere. Morning shows were discussing it. Medical journals were running editorials. Nurses were organizing rallies. The story had touched a nerve, exposed something that had been festering in healthcare for decades: the systematic undervaluing of nurses, the protection of incompetent doctors, the punishment of people who dared to challenge the hierarchy. And somehow, impossibly, Sarah had become the face of that movement. Her phone rang again. This time it was Janet. "Sarah, oh my God, are you okay? I'm so sorry I posted without asking you first, but I was so angry, and then everything just exploded and—" "Janet, breathe," Sarah said. "It's okay. Actually, it's more than okay. Really, because I thought I might have ruined your life. You might have saved it," Sarah said quietly. "Thank you for speaking up. I know that took courage." "Half the nursing staff is talking about quitting," Janet said. "We had a meeting this morning. The interim CEO promised changes, but nobody believes him. People are furious. Not just about you, about everything. All the times we've been ignored or dismissed or punished for doing our jobs. Your story opened the floodgates." They talked for another 20 minutes. Janet told her about the chaos at Mercy General, about nurses refusing to work with Dr. Westfield, about patients demanding to know if their care had been compromised by the hospital's policies. "It was a reckoning," Janet said. "Long overdue." After they hung up, Sarah made coffee and sat at her kitchen table, trying to process everything. Her life had changed completely in less than 24 hours. She had a new job, a new purpose, a new identity. She was no longer just Sarah Mitchell, the fired nurse. She was Sarah Mitchell, the woman who'd stood up to a broken system and won. But the victory felt strange, hollow in some ways, because it shouldn't have taken military helicopters and a national security emergency for people to recognize her competence. It shouldn't have taken a media firestorm for the hospital to face consequences. The system was still broken. She'd just managed to slip through a crack in it. Over the next few weeks, Sarah's life became a whirlwind. She completed her security clearance process and officially started as a Navy medical consultant. The work was challenging and fulfilling in ways Mercy General had never been. She was treated as an expert, her opinions valued, her decisions respected. She worked on protocol development, trained medical personnel, consulted on complex cases. No politics, no ego battles, just medicine. But she also became something she'd never expected, an advocate. She gave interviews about the need for healthcare reform. She spoke at nursing conferences about standing up for patient safety. She testified before a congressional committee about the systematic undervaluing of nurses in American healthcare. She used her platform, reluctantly at first but with growing confidence, to push for change. David Chen's lawsuit moved forward. Discovery revealed that Dr. Westfield had a pattern of negligence, that the hospital had received complaints about him before, that they'd protected him because he brought in revenue. The case settled out of court for an undisclosed sum, but the terms included mandatory policy changes at Mercy General and a formal apology to Sarah. She never went back to collect it. She didn't need their apology. She had something better, validation from the people who mattered. 6 months after the helicopters landed, Sarah received an invitation to speak at a nursing leadership conference in Washington, D.C. The keynote address, they said. They wanted her to talk about her experience, about what she'd learned, about how to change the culture of healthcare. She almost said no. She wasn't a public speaker. She was a nurse. But then she thought about all the messages she'd received from other nurses, from people who'd been punished for doing the right thing, from people who'd stayed silent because they were afraid. She thought about the 3 sailors she'd saved, about Mr. Chen recovering at home, about all the future patients who might benefit from the changes her story had sparked. She said yes. The conference center was packed. 2,000 nurses from across the country, filling every seat, standing in the aisles. Sarah stood backstage, her heart pounding, wondering what she could possibly say that would matter to these people. These professionals who dealt with impossible situations every day. Then she walked on stage, and the audience stood up. They applauded, they cheered, and Sarah understood. They weren't cheering for her specifically. They were cheering for what she represented, for the idea that competence mattered, that doing the right thing mattered, that nurses mattered. She spoke for 45 minutes. She told her story, from Mr. Chen's code to the rain-soaked parking lot to the helicopters landing. But more importantly, she talked about the systemic issues, about the need for change, about the power that nurses had if they chose to use it. We are not just following orders, she said. We are not just supporting actors in someone else's medical drama. We are professionals with expertise and judgment and the ability to save lives. And when the system fails, when doctors are absent, when administrators prioritize politics over patients, when protocols don't account for reality, we have a responsibility to act, not recklessly, not without thought, but with the competence and courage that our patients deserve. The applause when she finished was deafening. Afterward, dozens of nurses lined up to talk to her, to share their own stories, to thank her for speaking up. Sarah listened to each. One gave what advice she could, tried to offer the validation she knew they needed. One young nurse, maybe 25 years old, waited until the end. "Ms. Mitchell," she said quietly, "I'm in a situation like yours. I reported a doctor for incompetence, and now they're trying to fire me. I'm scared. I don't know what to do." Sarah looked at her, at this young woman who was facing the same choice she'd faced, and felt the weight of responsibility. What she said next mattered. It could change this woman's life. "Document everything," Sarah said. "Every incident, every conversation, every attempt to follow proper channels. Build your case, and don't back down. Because here's what I learned. Doing the right thing might cost you in the short term, but in the long term, it's the only thing that lets you live with yourself. And if they fire you for it, then you don't want to work there anyway. There are places that value competence. Find them, and in the meantime, know that you're not alone. There are thousands of us now speaking up, supporting each other, changing the system one case at a time. The young nurse nodded, tears in her eyes. "Thank you." After she left, Sarah stood alone in the empty conference room, feeling exhausted but strangely at peace. She'd come so far from that rainy parking lot, from that moment of humiliation and loss. She'd found not just a new job, but a new purpose. She'd become, somehow, a voice for people who'd been silenced for too long. Phone buzzed. A text from Commander Reeves. "Saw your speech online. Well done. We have a situation in San Diego that could use your expertise. Interested?" Sarah smiled and typed back, "Absolutely. When do I leave?" Because that was who she was now. Sarah Mitchell, RN, Navy consultant, advocate, expert. The woman who'd been fired for saving a life and had turned that injustice into a movement. The woman who'd proven that competence mattered, that nurses mattered, that doing the right thing mattered. The woman 2 military helicopters had come looking for, and she was just getting started.